Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Helmi and today I'm going to present a paper that I wrote with Dr. Shafiza Muhammad and Dr. Wan Noshira Wan Ghazali. And this paper entitled Framing Sustainable Energy, a comparative analysis of Malay and English newspapers in Malaysia. For this study, the aim is to examine how mainstream newspapers in Malaysia frame sustainable energy. And we have employed quantitative approach to identify dominant frames and news sources in the articles. And also we have employed media framing theory to be our framework for the analysis. The findings are we found out that the English newspapers are more proactive compared to Malay newspapers in driving the readers to be more engaged with sustainable energy issue. And the study also extends our understanding of the condition that enable and limit journalists with reporting environmental issue. A little bit introduction about sustainable development goals, or SDG. It is an initiative undertaken by the United Nations in 2015 to address a series of global issues such as gender inequality issues, quality education issues, environmental pollutions, affordable healthcare issues, and many other important issues. And for Litmaki argues that the media has a powerful role to potentially engage the general public to better understand the SDGs and their implications. Thus, it becomes important for us to know, to investigate how information about SDGs is disseminated through the media. We also need to ask questions such as how this effort is discussed and reported in the mass media, and how frequent does the media discuss and report about it. Okay, and here a little bit about sustainable energy itself. Sustainable energy generally refers to energy that has sustainable elements and can be used for survival today without risking the future. Okay, for example, today we have electric cars. So this electric car is part of this sustainable energy program. Okay, for this paper we have 4 research questions. The first one is how much do Malaysian newspapers cover about sustainable energy? Number 2, what are the news sources used by the newspapers when covering about sustainable energy? Number 3, what are the types of coverage used by the newspapers when covering about sustainable energy? And the last one is, how does Malaysian newspapers frame news on sustainable energy? So we have 4 research questions in total for this paper. There are some important literature review here I've included in this presentation. For Warnerberger, he supported the idea that developing countries tend to positively cover about sustainable energy. And for Litimaki, 2018 media coverage on sustainable energy in newspapers around the world is still at insufficient level. So we don't know yet about Malaysian media. Rees, 2019, media framing is influenced by the nature of a country. Okay, for him, in his study, he found out that if a country has many natural resources, that particular country tend to give more coverage about sustainable energy in their media. And for more than 2019, most newspapers focused only on broad and conventional themes. So most newspapers in this study, he found out that most newspapers tend to cover on this issue on or at surface level only. Okay, they don't go deep inside to investigate issues or play with a specific issue. And for Moser, we found out that newspaper reports focus more on negative events than positive events. So this might influence the society, the perception of the society about sustainable energy. Okay, for this study, we use framing theory to understand the data, to interpret the data. Okay, and for Griffin, he describes framing as the process of calling attention to some aspect and of reality while obscuring others. And for Edmund, he identified two kinds of frame, which is the first one is media frame, and the second one is audience frame. So for this study, we use media frames. Okay, this is the methodology for this paper. As I mentioned before, we employed a quantitative approach, which is content analysis technique to generate the data. And the newspaper articles used for the study were drawn from 1 January 2019 to 30 September 2019. And the unit of analysis was all articles available in the newspapers online that had keywords such as sustainable energy, sustainable new energy, sustainable resource. Okay, that's for English newspaper. And for the Malay newspaper, we have included keywords such as tenaga mampan, tenaga diperbaharui, dan tenaga bijak pakai. For the sampling, we use non-probability sampling, which is under this non-probability sampling, we have purposive sampling. So we choose our samples based on several criteria, such as Malay and English newspapers in Malaysia. Okay, so the result of our sampling process, we have chosen 4 different newspapers, 2 English newspapers and 2 Malay newspapers. For Malay, we have Berita Harian and Harian Metro. And for the English newspapers, we have The Star and News Straits Times. So based on online subscribers and circulation, we believe these are the 4 main newspapers in Malaysia. So this is the findings. Okay, so amount of coverage we can see here. Obviously, English newspapers give more coverage on sustainable energy issue. And then for research question number 2, what are the news sources used by the newspapers when covering about sustainable energy? So here also we can see there's significant differences between English newspapers and Malay newspapers. English newspapers tend to get the news from government agencies and private companies. Meanwhile, for Malay newspapers, they tend to get their news from government agents, from news agencies and their own journalists. Okay, for research question number 3, which is type of news coverage given by the selected newspapers. For research question number 3, we found that there are 6 types of coverage, including editorial, news, event coverage, issue coverage, and sponsored news. And the highest percentage of coverage for both English newspapers was news, which is 63.76%. And research question number 4, the news frame used by the selected newspapers. Okay. For NST, here we found that call for action frame and promoting government initiative frames are the highest frames for NST. And for Berita Harian, also promoting government initiative. Harian Metro, the highest frame is promoting government agencies, promoting government initiative. And also for the Star, the highest frame is this is a bit different, product promotion. Okay, for the Star is more towards commercial value. Okay, the discussion. We conclude that English newspapers write more about sustainable energy. They use sources, news types, and frames that indicated the importance and urgency of sustainable energy issue. And English newspapers also provided its readers with updated information that can multiple perspectives on sustainable energy. Meanwhile, the Malay newspapers were active in spreading news about government initiative. They didn't allocate enough content that push a call to action. They just report the news. The Malay newspapers also depended extensively on governmental agencies and their own journalist reporting, hence limiting the context of the issue. So their sources are not diversified. The English newspapers use a significant number of action frames in their coverage, hence persuading the public to become active supporters and adopters of sustainable energy. The readers of the Malay newspapers that make up the biggest section of the Malay public will be less informed and will not get the urgency in supporting sustainable energy. So that's our conclusion for this paper. So if you have any question, later you can ask me, inshallah. Thank you very much.